Hi everybody, I'm Joe Parker of the Pixel Depot, and in this video we're going to discuss model railroading, why it's such a great hobby, and if you should pick it as your own. But let's get some formalities out of the way first. Subscribe to the channel for ongoing information about model railroading, hints, tips, how-tos, and updates. And click on the bell so you'll get notified when there's new content available. So with that out of the way, let's get back to the question at hand. Should you pick model railroading as your hobby? Yes. All done. Oh, wait. We're not done? There's more? So, you've heard about this model train thing, and maybe you're wondering if it's for you. There's lots of reasons why you might be interested, and if you're watching this video, it probably means you at least think you'd like it. I'm probably biased, but I think model railroading is a great hobby. I've been a serious modeler for the last 25 years, and beyond that, I've had an interest dating back to the first train set I got when I was 8 years old. Over the years, I've had a lot of fun with this hobby. I've learned a lot, and I've made some great lifelong friends. So I would recommend it to anyone. But is it for you? First, do you like trains? Yes? Then there's a better than average chance that model railroading might be of interest to you. What's that? You don't like trains? Well, believe it or not, model railroading might still be for you. More on that later. Do you like building things? This is where many people get started in the hobby, and from its earliest days, model railroading's been about building. And there's a wide variety of things that you can build. If you like carpentry, you can build what we call benchwork, that is the supporting structure for the layout. You can build structures either from kits or from scratch or some combination of the two, and the same thing goes pretty much for train cars. If you're into metalworking, you can build locomotives from scratch. If you're into 3D printing, you can design, print, and build your own creations. Those with an electronics bent can get into lighting, signaling, and other gadgetry, and Arduinos and other small electronic packages have become more common in the hobby over the last couple of years, and I only see their use growing. You can even build your own track from pieces of wood and metal. If you're into any of these, model railroading may be for you, and you might want to stay tuned. Now, there are things to consider. As with any hobby, there's time involved, there's some level of expense, and it's probably worth thinking about if it's something you think you'll stick with. It's up to you to determine if you're willing to make those commitments. So this is the part where you say, "Sounds interesting, Joe, but talk more about these considerations. I still have lots of questions." And that's pretty common. Some of the questions I hear a lot include, why is model railroading a great hobby? Why did you get into it? Is it hard to get started? Is it expensive? Do I need a lot of space? What if I'm not good at everything I need to do? What if I'm not good at anything I need to do? And finally, isn't it weird for a grown adult to be playing with toys? Spoiler alert, no, it's not. So let's talk about these. So what's so great about this hobby anyway? Well, it's interesting. When I was putting the notes together for this video, I thought this would be a good place to start, and I actually thought it was going to be an easy question to answer. I may have been wrong about that. Now the short, easy answer is, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But then the natural follow-up question is, well, why? And that's where things get a little more tricky. And I think that's because the answer to the question is different depending on who you ask. The vast majority of modelers get started because they like trains. I mean, that seems obvious, right? And sure, the focus of a model railroad generally is the trains, and that's where it starts for people, but it's not just that. You see, model railroading is made up of a bunch of different disciplines that all come together to form this big, beautiful thing, and that thing is the layout. It's something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. To build a full layout, you'll need to have or build a base, lay track, wire the track so it gets electricity, build structures, do scenery, and so on. And that may all sound scary, but bear with me. The beauty of that is that at the end of the build process, you have this little world where your models live. And unlike some forms of modeling, like model cars or military models, these actually run. They move. You have control. They have a purpose. And unlike model planes, it's unlikely that your train is going to fall from the sky and get destroyed. A lot of people when they're starting, kids especially, think that getting to the moving train is the only goal and want to rush everything up until that point. Now, I'm not going to lie, there's nothing like seeing that first engine move on your layout. But more often than not, for most adult modelers, and some kids too, they discover that the journey, or some part or parts of the journey, is just as important to the quest for fun as the destination. In fact, I have friends who are really in it just for the building process. They love building bench work or track laying or some other aspect, and once the layout's actually built and up and running, they don't even want to run trains. They just don't enjoy that part that much. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. And that's where, if you don't really like trains, you can still have model railroading as your hobby. That building process might be what actually does it for you. Often, you don't learn what floats your boat, so to speak, until you do an activity, and generally when you start, you don't know what aspects of the hobby you're really going to love. A lot of people find that the things they love at the beginning aren't the same as what they love 5, 10, or 50 years in. So my point is that there are so many bits that go into building a train layout that even if you start out just wanting to run trains, you're likely to discover some other things about the process that you really enjoy too. And that's what makes this hobby great. It's the variety. There are so many things that you can do within the bounds of the hobby that are just a lot of fun. Performing those tasks are fun for people, and there's usually not just one of them that you enjoy. So why did I get into model railroading? Well, like I said earlier in the video, I got my first train set when I was 8 years old. And that's a fairly common theme, by the way, among modelers, is the train set they got underneath the Christmas tree or something like that when they were really young. Got them started on trains, and there's been no looking back. For me personally, in my youngest years, we always lived close to a rail line, and I just loved to sit and watch the trains. I could sit there for hours just watching them go by. It wasn't until I got out of college and I was looking for a hobby that I got back into it. And at that point in time, I was not particularly a patient person. I thought that building small, fairly delicate models would be something that would help me with my patience. And I think that worked. Is that ready yet? Mostly. I belong to a lot of online model railroad groups, and a common question about modeling is whether it's hard to get started. And the answer is no. Actually, it's remarkably easy to get started. In fact, I think it might be too easy to get started. And you might think that's a little weird, so what do I mean by that? Well, you can go to a hobby shop or places like Amazon.com and buy a train set that comes with a locomotive, a few cars, a loop of track, and a power pack. And you can be up and running on your dining room table in about 15 minutes. It's really that easy. But my experience tells me that you're going to get bored with that loop of track pretty quickly. So unless it's for around the Christmas tree or some other hands-off display, I wouldn't really recommend going that route. In my opinion, a better idea is to familiarize yourself with some of the choices that you have. And I'll be honest, there are a lot of choices out there. Think about what it is you like and what it is that got you interested in trains in the first place. For example, do you have a favorite railroad or a favorite railroad paint scheme? Do you like steam or diesel or even electric locomotives? Do you have a favorite era? It might be the steam era, it might be the transition from steam to diesel, it might be the modern era. These are all different and have different operating rules and different ways of modeling things, so it can be quite interesting and quite different. Have you even thought about what scale you think you might like? Now, if even these terms are a little bit foreign to you, I think you should definitely take a step back and spend a little time to do some research. Otherwise, you can end up buying things just on impulse. And I've known a lot of people, myself included, that before they were really sure what they wanted and really sure what they liked, they would go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff. And what they ended up with was a lot of things that they didn't or couldn't use once they had a better idea of what they wanted. Or worse, they just get bored and pack the whole thing up or give it all away before they even really get a chance to get started and potentially miss out on a great lifelong experience. There's a world of information out there as close as your favorite search engine that can help answer some of these questions for you, and I really suggest that you take advantage of them. Is it expensive? The age-old question. The honest answer is, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Keep in mind, most of the time when you pick up a new hobby, there's going to be some level of initial investment. Anglers need a rod and reel, photographers need a camera, if you're going to play sports, it requires equipment, and so on. Model railroading is no different. There's a base level of tools and equipment you're going to need to get started, and that's going to cost some amount of money. That amount of money is going to be different depending on how you go about things. I think it would be wise to sit down and think about what your budget might be, because you can get good quality items affordably, but there is also a high end of the market that can be quite costly. You can spend hundreds of dollars on a single locomotive, or $50 to $60 or even more dollars on a single piece of rolling stock. But you don't have to do this. So knowing your budget will help you figure out what level of equipment you want to buy. Most brands have an entry-level line that's much more affordable, and there are still a few companies like Accurail and Scale Trains that offer low-cost kits. Besides that, like the other hobbies I mentioned, there's a healthy used market for model railroad equipment. After all, what do you think happens to all that stuff that I mentioned that people buy when they get started, and then they discover they don't have any use for it? You can try auction sites like eBay, but to be honest, there aren't a lot of bargains to be found there anymore. In fact, things are often overpriced. A better bet is a local train show. Now, I'm filming this in early 2021, and pandemic notwithstanding, under normal circumstances there are usually train shows and swap meets around the country where you can pick up used equipment at generally good prices. They tend to happen mostly in the winter months, but you can find some year-round, so keep your eye open for local notices, and if you read any of the model magazines, there's usually a list of upcoming shows and events that you can find. Here's a pro tip for when you go to the train shows. Don't be afraid to haggle like you would at a garage sale. Another good bet's a local hobby shop. It is becoming harder and harder to find a good, well-stocked local hobby shop that specializes in trains. Unfortunately, the internet has made it harder for them to compete, so there are just fewer of them around. You may have to travel a little bit to find a good shop, but when you do find a good one, it's well worth it. They'll be happy to help you find things that are within your budget, and the people there are usually also very knowledgeable about the hobby, so they can answer many of the questions that you have. People often think that you need a lot of space to build a layout. To be honest, a lot of the layouts that get featured in the model press are large, complicated affairs with huge footprints and multiple decks and so on. But if you live in an apartment or only have a small area that you're able to negotiate to use on your project, don't worry. I'm here to tell you having a lot of space is not a requirement. The reality is you can have a ton of fun with something quite small. In fact, there are whole websites devoted to micro layouts, some of which are as small as 1 square foot. These layouts are functional, supporting operations in these small footprints, and can be a really great way to get started. I'll include a link to a popular site in the description below. Small layouts give you the benefit of getting started, practicing, and remaining active in the hobby. They also give you a great opportunity to build something that you can detail highly, which is difficult to do on a large layout. Soon I'll be starting a series of videos on building a small layout from scratch that I hope will prove this point. It'll fit in the area you see behind me here, which is 15 inches wide by 90 inches long, or about 38 centimeters by 230 centimeters. This layout is going to depict a small alley and will support a whole bunch of operations. The point is, you don't need much space at all to get started. If you have a large area, great, but it is not a necessity. You can build a layout on a bookshelf, in a closet, or you can even build a portable layout that stores under your bed. There's lots of options out there, and I suggest that if you're tight on space, you take the opportunity to do some research and figure out what might work for you. There are a lot of different tasks involved in building a layout, and frankly, a lot of skills to acquire. The list on the screen covers some of the aspects of model railroading, and it can be daunting, especially if you're just getting started. People worry about not being good at everything that they need to do, but no one's good at it when they first get started. I also have some news for you. Very few, if any, of the people I know are good at all of them. Now, you will need to learn skills, and for many of them, it's a case of practice makes perfect. And just like anything else, you have to start somewhere. Yes, your first attempts may be disasters, but that's okay. It's all part of the learning process. I also want to share a couple of secrets with you. 1. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I screw up regularly. Even master modelers make mistakes. Maybe they make fewer of them, but that all comes down to experience. 2. Most of the time when you do make a mistake, you can recover from it. When those master modelers make mistakes, which they do, it comes down to how well they can hide them. It can also be helpful to work with a group of like-minded modelers. That's what I do with my Monument City Terminal division. That way you can share the load, and it's likely that one of your friends will at least be passable at something that you're not good at. For example, I'm not good at soldering. I'm just not. I'm better at it than I used to be, and again, practice helps, but I don't enjoy it and I don't do it often enough to get really good at it. However, one of my friends who's part of my modeling group is great at it, and he's usually happy to do soldering work when we have our modeling sessions. As a benefit, he's also been known to go back and clean up some of the messes I've made, so I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. If you're so new to modeling that you don't know any other modelers, try joining an online mailing list or a Facebook group or even a local model railroad club. You'll be surprised at how many modelers are out there, and most of them are willing to help newcomers learn. The other thing you may find as you talk to people is that you already know someone who's a modeler and they've just never mentioned it. If you're not good at anything in model railroading, well, that may be a challenge. Now, it may just come down to the fact that you're an absolute beginner and you just haven't tried anything, or you're just getting started and need to build up your skills. So like I said, buy a kit or two and dive in. You'll start to pick things up and you may find you're better at it than you think. If you've tried all that and find you're just terrible at it all, well, I can understand wanting to throw in the towel. That can be pretty frustrating. But don't lose hope just yet. Remember when I said before that most things come in some sort of pre-built form? This is where that can come in. In years past, most train cars came in kit form. You would have to build them before you could run them. But today, most rolling stock is ready to run. That is, you take it out of the box, you put it on the track, and it'll work. You might need to make a few tweaks, but for the most part, you're good to go. Same thing for locomotives. Also today, you can buy pre-cut benchwork. So if you're not good at carpentry, you've got some options there. In this case, all you need is a screwdriver. Sometimes you don't even need that. Some companies will install it for you. Likewise, structure kits. There are model manufacturers out there who sell fully built-up structures. Even if they don't, there are also vendors out there that will take a manufacturer's kits, build them, and resell them, and you can often find those at train shows. Some companies even take custom orders, so you send them the kit you want them to build along with a check, and a little while later a fully built structure comes back. So you have options. In fact, pick pretty much any task in model railroading, and I bet you can find someone who will do it for you for a fee. Even layouts. Some people who just want the enjoyment of running trains will pay to have someone design and build their entire layout for them. Of course, this route isn't for everyone because it tends to be awfully expensive, but it is an option. And it shows that even if you don't know a flathead screwdriver from a Phillips, you can have a model railroad. This one drives me nuts a little bit, but there can be a stigma associated with model railroading. Some people will say, grow up, or I can't believe someone your age still plays with toys, or some people think it's weird to play with trains in the basement. Well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with playing with toys as an adult. I mean, think about it. What's a sports car but a really expensive toy? And secondly, if you look at most of what's available in the hobby today, they aren't toys. They're finely detailed scale models. It can be hard to make people understand this, but it's a hobby. It's not necessarily playing with toys. Further, in my opinion, there's an element of art in modeling. Some people like to paint, some people like to take photographs, some people like to do clay pottery. Modeling is an art just like all of those, and if that's what you get enjoyment from, I say go for it. Besides, you're an adult. With few exceptions, it's not like you have to justify yourself to these people. Okay, so if after me blathering on for all this time you're still here, there's a good chance you might like model railroading, and I say you should try and give it a shot. I'd encourage you to spend some time to learn more. Like I said, there's a lot to digest, and it can be a little overwhelming, or a lot overwhelming, to take it all in. But take it a little bit at a time and you'll be fine. Like I said earlier, we all have to start somewhere. There are lots of resources of information available, and some quick and easy ones that I would suggest are these. Buy a model train magazine, Model Railroader, Railroad Model Craftsman. There's even a free online magazine called Model Railroad Hobbyist. They're all great places to start. Use the internet. As I said earlier, search engines are your friends here. And continue to watch YouTube videos. There are a number of helpful channels out there. And as this channel grows, there will be a lot more informational and how-to videos, so I hope you'll come back often. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope it's helped to understand the hobby a bit better and demystify a few things. Maybe you'll take the plunge. I've covered a lot of ground here, so I'd recommend liking this video so it will get saved to your liked playlist and you can come back and review it anytime you need to. It's also quite possible I missed something, so if there's anything that you think is important that I didn't mention, or you have questions or suggestions, I encourage you to include them in the comments below. I'm Joe Parker of the Pixel Depot. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll meet me again next time in the train room.